There's a boy in a field, a shepherd, no armor, no army, no name that anyone knows yet. And in a few days, his faith will change the course of a nation. For 40 days, an army of Israel has been frozen, not by weather, not by supply lines, by one man, one giant. His name is Goliath, and he's changed everything. Goliath of Gath, 9 feet tall, maybe taller, a professional warrior from childhood. Every weapon forged specifically for his body, every armor tested in 100 battles. He's not just strong, he's mathematically impossible to defeat. Every morning Goliath comes to the valley. Every morning he calls out, "Choose a man, let him come to me. If he defeats me, we will be your slaves. But if I defeat him, you will be our slaves." For 40 days, no one answers. Fear has paralyzed an entire nation. King Saul promised a reward. Whoever defeats Goliath will be given riches, his daughter's hand in marriage, his father's family freed from taxes, a king's reward. And still, no one comes forward. Even the promise of a kingdom cannot overcome the mathematics of fear. David's 3 oldest brothers were at war. Their father, Jesse, was a shepherd with several sons. The older boys Eliab, Abinadab, Shimei, went to fight under Saul. David stayed home. He was too young, or so they thought. While his brothers fought, David was a shepherd. And while he kept the sheep, he wasn't just protecting animals. He was learning something the greatest warriors never learn. He was learning to trust God when he was completely alone. One day Jesse called David, "Go to the army camp. Bring food to your brothers. Find out how they're doing." It was a simple task. A father sending a son to check on his older brothers. But this simple errand would change everything. David traveled to the valley, the same valley where an army of Israel was paralyzed by fear. He had no idea what was waiting, no idea that his simple obedience to his father would become a moment of extraordinary faith. David arrived at the camp, thousands of soldiers, all paralyzed, all waiting, all afraid. He found his brothers and started asking questions. What's happening here? Why is everyone frozen? And that's when his brother Eliab's answer changed everything. His brother Eliab was angry. Why did you come? Who's watching your sheep? I know your pride. I know your arrogance. You came to see the battle. But David wasn't there for pride. David was there because he couldn't stay silent any longer. David asked the soldiers, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Why does he defy the armies of the living God?" The soldiers looked at him like he was crazy. But David wasn't crazy. He was asking the only question that mattered. The soldiers told David about Saul's promise, riches, the king's daughter, a dynasty, everything a man could want. And yet no one accepted, because mathematics doesn't care about rewards. Fear is stronger than gold. That's when David heard it, Goliath's voice. The reality hit everyone. The sheer size, the sheer power. This wasn't a story anymore. It was a 9-foot-tall man saying, "I am your doom." And in that moment, something shifted in David. David was brought before King Saul, and what David said next was either the bravest thing anyone had ever heard, or the most insane. "Let no one lose heart because of this Philistine. I will go and fight him." Saul looked at David with pity. "You're just a boy. Goliath's been a warrior since his youth." The king was right. By every logical measure, it was impossible. But faith doesn't measure by logic. Faith measures by what God has done before. David said, "Your Majesty, I've been a shepherd. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb, I'd chase it, strike it, and rescue the lamb. And if it turned on me, I'd grab it by its mane and strike it until it died." David wasn't bragging. He was testifying. He was saying, "I've already faced death. God delivered me." David wasn't fighting wild animals for glory. He was fighting them because his job mattered. A lamb was his responsibility. And when death came for his responsibility, he didn't hesitate. The Lord saved him, not because he was strong, but because his faith was in the right place. Saul said, "Go." and the Lord be with you." Then he dressed David in his own armor, a king's armor, heavy, professional, designed for a warrior. But when David tried to walk in it, he couldn't. It wasn't his. He removed it. David didn't need a king's armor. He went to the stream and picked up 5 smooth stones. 5. He put them in his shepherd's bag, his sling, that was all. And somewhere in the valley, Goliath was probably laughing. And then David walked toward Goliath. The giant saw him coming and was insulted. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Goliath's words dripped with contempt. This was beneath him. This was an insult to his honor. Goliath cursed David by his gods. "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the beasts of the field." These weren't idle threats. Goliath had killed men before. Many men, and he was about to kill one more. Or so he thought. And David spoke. His voice was calm, clear, absolute. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands." Goliath moved toward David, and when a 900-pound man with a 20-foot spear moves toward you, there's only one thing that matters: faith. Everything else, logic, experience, mathematics, it all means nothing in the face of absolute trust. David ran toward Goliath. He reached into his bag, 1 stone, he put it in his sling, spun it once, twice, 3 times, and released. That stone traveled faster than thought, faster than Goliath could react. It flew straight and true. Goliath fell. His massive body hit the ground. The man who had terrorized an entire nation for 40 days was defeated by a stone and a boy's faith. The silence was louder than any scream, and then Israel erupted. The fear that had frozen them for 40 days vanished in an instant. Soldiers screamed, cried, rushed toward the valley to reclaim their nation. A boy's faith had done what an army couldn't. The Philistines saw their champion fall. Their confidence shattered. They began to flee, and Israel, no longer afraid, pursued them. 1 moment, 1 stone, 1 act of faith, rewritten the course of a war. Saul watched David, and in that moment the king's life changed too. He now had a leader who could rally his nation, a warrior who understood faith. But Saul couldn't know, that he was looking at his own replacement. David took Goliath's sword, a weapon designed for a giant, now in the hands of a shepherd boy. This would become the sword that defined a dynasty, that forged a kingdom, that changed history. The news reached Bethlehem. Jesse heard that his youngest son, the one he sent to care for sheep, had defeated a giant, had saved a nation. The shepherd boy had become a legend. David was brought to Saul's court. He was honored, celebrated. Songs were written about him. Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. The shepherd boy from Bethlehem had become a national hero. His ascent had begun. David also met Jonathan, King Saul's son, and something happened between them that was deeper than politics. They recognized each other. 2 warriors, 2 hearts. What was born in that moment would last forever. But in the palace, Saul heard the women singing, "Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands," and something broke inside the king. He had given everything, his body, his courage, and now his nation was singing praises to a shepherd boy instead of him. From that day, Saul eyed David with suspicion. The gratitude he felt became jealousy. The respect became fear. And fear is the most dangerous thing a king can feel. It makes him do things he can never undo. David became Saul's military commander, and with every battle, his legend grew. Every victory made him more famous, more beloved by the people, more threatening to the king. And then one day, while David played his harp for Saul, the king's jealousy became violence. He hurled a spear at David. If David's reflexes hadn't been perfect, he would have been a corpse. In that moment, everything changed. Saul became a hunter. David became hunted. David fled. The man he had served, the man he had saved, now wanted him dead. And Saul didn't stop at one attempt. He hunted David like a fugitivo. David became a fugitive, but Jonathan chose his friend over his father. "Whatever Saul wants, I will stand with you," Jonathan said. Friendship became more powerful than blood. David hid in a cave, and something extraordinary happened. The broken, the desperate, the forgotten, they came to him, about 400 men, and David led them. With the same faith that had defeated Goliath, Saul pursued David across the wilderness. Year after year, he was king. He had resources, he had soldiers, but David had faith, and faith is the strongest force on earth. One day, Saul entered a cave where David was hiding. David's men whispered, "This is the day. Kill him." But David refused. He cut off only a corner of Saul's robe. He was saying, "I will not destroy the Lord's anointed." David showed Saul the corner of his robe. "I had you in my power, but I would not lift my hand against the Lord's anointed." And for a moment, Saul's madness lifted. He saw David's character. He saw who his rival really was. Years passed. Saul's obsession consumed him. He was a king losing his kingdom, a warrior losing his strength, and still he hunted David. In his final days, as war raged with the Philistines, Saul knew his reign was ending. On Mount Gilboa, Saul's reign ended. His sons fell in battle beside him, wounded and surrounded. Saul fell on his own sword, a king destroyed not by enemies, but by the jealousy that consumed him. When David heard that Saul and Jonathan were dead, he mourned. Yes, Saul had hunted him, but Saul was still his king. Jonathan was still his brother. David's grief was real. He understood that even enemies can be loved. And then, in Hebron, the elders of Israel came to David. They anointed him king. The shepherd boy who had defeated a giant, who had been hunted like a fugitivo, who had trusted God in the wilderness. He was now king of Israel. David established his kingdom. He made Jerusalem his capital. He brought peace to Israel. And he did it not through the cruelty Saul had known, but through wisdom, through faith, through the lessons he had learned as a shepherd. David was both warrior and poet, both king and servant of God. He expanded Israel's borders. He wrote psalms that would be sung for thousands of years. He was the king his nation needed, the leader God had chosen from. Before his birth, at the height of his power, David had everything: wealth, security, respect. But power, even righteous power, can blind a man. And David would soon learn that even the greatest faith can be tested by the seduction of success. And somewhere, in a quiet moment, David might have reflected on his journey, from shepherd boy to king, from faith tested in wilderness to power wielded in cities. He had learned that faith is not just for moments of crisis, it's for moments of success. We return to the Vale of Elah, where a boy with 5 stones and unshakable faith defeated a giant, where fear was conquered by trust. This valley became the birthplace of a dynasty, the throne of an empire, the bloodline of the Messiah. The story of David and Goliath is not just an ancient tale. It's the story of how faith defeats impossibility, how a boy with a stone and trust in God can change the course of nations, how the smallest among us can be the greatest, how one moment of courage can reshape history forever. In his chamber, David wrote, not orders of war, but prayers, psalms, songs of faith. He was recording not just his victories, but his struggles, his doubts, his absolute trust in God through it all. The story of David and Goliath is not mythology, it's history. Archaeologists have found evidence of the cities mentioned. The warfare patterns match. The weapons described are real. This was a moment that changed the trajectory of a kingdom. What does the story of David and Goliath teach us? That faith is not wishful thinking. Faith is trust based on past experience with God. David had seen God deliver him from lions and bears. So when Goliath came, David didn't hesitate. He had already learned that God is faithful. Fear says, look at the size of the enemy. Look at the odds. It's impossible. Faith says, I've seen God work before. I trust him now. The entire story pivots on this choice. Will Israel listen to fear, or will they trust God? David wasn't bigger or stronger. He was smaller, younger, less experienced. But he had something Goliath didn't have. He trusted in something beyond himself. He trusted in God. And that faith, even faith the size of a mustard seed, can move mountains. The story starts with obedience to a father. Jesse said, go check on your brothers. That's it. That's the entire beginning. David didn't know he was walking toward destiny. He was just obeying his father. Sometimes the greatest movements of God start with the smallest acts of obedience. From a shepherd boy to a king. From a valley duel to a dynasty. From one moment of faith to a legacy that would last thousands of years. This is not just a story about defeating giants. It's a story about how one person's trust in God can reshape nations. The Vale of Elah stands silent now, but it will never be forgotten. It's the place where a boy taught a nation what faith means, where fear was defeated, where the impossible became inevitable. This is where giants fall. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of faith, if you want to understand more stories like this, stories that change how you see God, yourself, and history, subscribe to Biblical Truth Revealed. But David's story doesn't end here. His faith would be tested again. His heart would be broken. He would become a warrior, a king, a failure, a forgiven man. And those stories, the complete arc of David, they're waiting for you in the next episode. Why does the story of David still resonate 3,000 years later? Because it's not about armor or weapons. It's about the battle inside every person. The battle between fear and faith. And David's victory gives us permission to believe that our victory is possible too. After Goliath, David's faith would be tested again. Saul hunted him. He hid in caves. He had moments of doubt, but he kept trusting. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is trust despite fear. That's the real lesson. Saul had everything, the crown, the army, the authority. But he was threatened by a shepherd boy. Why? Because authority without faith is fragile. David had nothing but faith, and it made him unshakable. This is the difference between ruling and leading. David had a chance to kill Saul. His enemies would have cheered. His problems would have been solved, but he refused. He said, I will not lift my hand against the Lord's anointed. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching, when it costs you everything. And when David had the chance to confront Saul, he showed him grace. He could have demanded justice, could have demanded the crown. Instead, he offered forgiveness. This is what true leadership looks like, power tempered by mercy. Saul's story matters, not because he was great, but because his failure teaches us. Fear, jealousy, and pride, these destroy kingdoms. David's story teaches us that faith, integrity, and humility build them. Both stories are necessary. Under David, Israel was transformed from a scattered collection of tribes to a unified kingdom, from hiding from enemies to conquering them, from chaos to order. One man's faith reshaped a nation, but David was more than a warrior or a king. He was a poet, a musician. His psalms, prayers, and songs would comfort billions of people across millennia. He showed that strength and sensitivity can exist in the same person. David didn't just build a kingdom for his lifetime, he built a legacy. His son, Solomon, would inherit the throne. His dynasty would last 400 years. His psalms would be sung forever. His line would lead to Jesus. One man's faith created an eternal legacy. What does David's story mean for you today? You might not be facing a giant with armor and a spear, but you're facing giants. Doubt, fear, impossible circumstances, economic pressure, health crises, personal battles that feel insurmountable. David's lesson is this: your faith is not dependent on your circumstances. You don't Need perfect conditions to trust God? You don't need guarantees, you just need to remember, God has been faithful before. He was faithful to David in the wilderness. He will be faithful to you. David's significance doesn't end with him. His lineage continues. His faith story becomes a template. And according to Scripture, Jesus, the Messiah, would come from David's line. David's faith points to something greater, a salvation that would come for all humanity. If you're watching this, David's story is also your story. You might feel small, insignificant. Compared to your giants, you might feel like you have only a stone and a sling, but that's exactly what David had, and it was enough. If this story moved you, if you felt something shift in how you see faith and fear, comment below with a phrase that resonates. Truth moment, no fear, just clarity. Faith defeats giants. Whatever speaks to you, share this with someone who needs to hear that their faith matters, that their giants can be defeated, that God sees them. And subscribe so you don't miss the next story, the continuation of David's journey, and the other biblical narratives that will transform how you understand God. But David's story continues. After his victory over Goliath, he became a fugitive, a hunted man. He would face his own wilderness not to test his faith, but to deepen it. And when he finally became king, he would learn that faith in victory is harder than faith in battle. From shepherd to fugitive, from fugitive to king, from obscurity to eternity. David's journey in less than a lifetime reshaped everything. One stone, one moment, one decision to trust instead of fear. That's all it took to change the course of nations. If you're young and facing something impossible, know this: your age is not your weakness. Your faith is your strength. David was young. He changed history. If you've lost your job, your security, your sense of direction, remember David. He lost everything. When Saul hunted him, he hid in caves. And from that wilderness, he became a king. If you feel invisible, if you feel overlooked, if you feel like your talents don't matter, David felt that too. He was the youngest son, the one left to tend sheep, the one no one thought would matter. And he changed the world. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to be the strongest. You just need faith. Even faith the size of your hand. Even faith you can hold in your palm. That's enough. Your small act of obedience matters. Your simple kindness matters. Your quiet faithfulness matters. David's father asked him to bring food to his brothers. That's all. Just a simple errand. And it set in motion everything. Remember what God has already done in your life. Remember the times he came through. Remember the impossible situations he resolved. David fought lions and bears. When Goliath came, he didn't see an impossible giant. He saw another test he had already learned to pass. You're not alone in this. David had his brothers. He had Jonathan. He had followers. And even when he was hunted, he had community. Find your people, the ones who believe with you, the ones who stand with you. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching, when it costs you everything. David had a chance to kill Saul and take the kingdom. His followers wanted him to, but he refused. He chose integrity over opportunity and forgiveness. Don't underestimate the power of forgiveness. David forgave Saul not because Saul deserved it, but because forgiveness sets you free. It breaks the cycle. It opens the path to healing. Your Goliath might be addiction. Your Goliath might be anxiety. Your Goliath might be a relationship that's breaking. Your Goliath might be a diagnosis that terrifies you. But the principle is the same. Faith defeats impossibility. Your battle might not look like David's, but if you're fighting it with faith, instead of fear, you're on the same path David walked. And that path leads somewhere. That path leads to victory. Take a moment, right now, pause, think about your giant, name it, acknowledge it, and then choose. Choose faith. Not because it's logical, can work in this situation. Not because it's logical, but because it's true. This story has been told for 3,000 years. By believers and scholars, by artists and warriors, by poets and kings. For walking this journey with us, for sitting in silence with David's faith, for witnessing how giants fall, for understanding that your story matters too. The Vale of Isla stands empty now, but it will never be forgotten, because what happened there teaches us eternal truth about faith, courage, and the power of believing when the world says it's impossible. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is trust that's stronger than fear. Your giants will fall, not because you're strong enough, but because God is faithful, always, in every age, in every story. In your story, this is biblical truth revealed, not the history of the past, but the truth for your present, for your future, your faith, your giants, your victory. Subscribe to Biblical Truth Revealed, because the stories that change how you see yourself, that reshape how you understand God, that transform your future, they're waiting for you. Comment below. Tell us your truth moment. When did you see a giant fall in your own life? When did faith prove stronger than fear? Share your story, because your story matters. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their faith matters, with someone who's facing their own Goliath, with someone who's forgotten that their story can change the world. But David's story doesn't end with Goliath. His faith would be tested in ways even deeper than facing a giant. He would become a fugitive. He would hide in caves. His own king would hunt him, and then he became a king, the greatest king Israel would ever know. But the path from shepherd to king wasn't a straight line. It was a wilderness. It was a test of faith even deeper than facing Goliath. In the next episode, we follow David's complete journey, from fugitive to founder of a dynasty. From fear to faith that reshapes a nation. From one victory to a legacy that lasts forever. One boy, one stone, one moment of faith in a valley. That moment created a dynasty. That moment led to a king whose line would eventually bring the Messiah. All history pivots on one decision. As you sit with this story, as you reflect on David's faith and your own, know this: your struggle has meaning, your faith has power. Your small act of obedience can reshape everything. The same God who is faithful to David is faithful to you. The same power that knocked down Goliath is available to you. The same victory is possible for you, not because you deserve it, but because God is faithful, always. Biblical Truth Revealed. Biblical Truth Revealed. Take a moment. Breathe. Sit with what you've heard. Thank you for being here, for witnessing David's story, for letting it touch your heart. Until next time, until your next story, until we meet again in the truth. Biblical Truth Revealed.